This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Israel's Attorney General decides to indict Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What does this mean for Netanyahu's political fate and Israel's future? Plus, CBN's Scott Ross visits Hebron and the Tomb of the Patriarchs, one of the holiest places in Judaism, a fact denied by the UN. And this family flees ISIS and finds hope and a future. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fought back after Israel's Attorney General announced he planned to indict Netanyahu on charges of bribery and breach of trust. The charges put Netanyahu, the second longest serving prime minister in Israel's history, in the fight of his political life. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went on national TV to defend himself.
The left is doing this because they know they can't beat us at the ballot box. They simply can't beat us at the ballot box. For 3 years, they have been carrying out a political pursuit against us, an unprecedented hunting expedition with one goal: to topple the right-wing government led by me, and to bring to power the leftist party of Lapid and Gantz.
Netanyahu said the left put enormous pressure on Israel's Attorney General to influence the elections and felt confident he'd be vindicated.
I tell you, the citizens of Israel, this house of cards will collapse. I am absolutely certain of that. I am certain of it 4,000%. I plan on serving you and the state as prime minister for many years.
Netanyahu's main challenger, retired General Benny Gantz, said Netanyahu had to go.
People of Israel, tonight, with the publication of the recommendation of the Attorney General, and in these circumstances this has happened, sitting with Benjamin Netanyahu in the same government is off the table. I call on you, Benjamin Netanyahu, from here tonight, to come to your senses, show responsibility, and resign from your post.
Israel's Attorney General Avihai Mandelblit announced he would indict Netanyahu in 3 ongoing investigations. In the most serious case, Netanyahu is suspected of firing Israel's communications ministry director in exchange for favorable coverage in one of Israel's top news sites.
We are entering uncharted waters. An incumbent prime minister was never indicted in Israel's history as he was still serving as prime minister. From a legal perspective, nothing will change in the immediate term before the decision on the indictment is final. Once the decision is final, there's legal ambiguity on whether the prime minister can remain in office or not.
The indictments also threaten Netanyahu's political future. The current polls are so close that even if Netanyahu's Likud party lost just a few seats because of these accusations, it could turn the tide of the upcoming election. And the elections will be held on April 9th. Well, during President Trump's press conference in Hanoi after his meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, he answered a question about the legal charges and political challenges facing Netanyahu.
Well, I just think he's been a great prime minister, and I don't know about his difficulty, but you're telling me something that, people have been hearing about, but I don't know about that. I can say this, that he's done a great job as prime minister. He's tough, he's smart, he's strong.
President Trump also addressed the upcoming U.S. peace plan expected to be revealed after Israel's elections.
There is a chance for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. And, it's interesting, all my life I've heard that the toughest of all deals, when they talk about tough deals, we all like deals, but the toughest of all deals would be peace between Israel and the Palestinians. They say it's like the impossible deal. I'd love to be able to produce it. We'll see what happens. We were paying the Palestinians a lot of money, and I ended that about 2 years ago because they weren't saying the right things. And I said, why would we pay somebody that's not saying nice things about us and not really wanting to go to the peace table? And they've been much better, and we'll see what happens. But I think we have actually a good shot at peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
Jared Kushner is one of the architects of what President Trump calls the deal of the century, a peace plan between Israelis and Palestinians. He's been visiting capitals in the Middle East to gather support for the proposal. Well, Gary Lane discussed the plan with Middle East expert Jonathan Chanzer on the Global Lane.
Why is Jared Kushner going to the Middle East? We've seen some diplomacy here between the Saudi Arabians, also Gulf states, UAE, right? Bahrain, Qatar. What's going on?
Well, it's interesting that really the common foe that the Arabs and the Israelis have is Iran. And the fear of Iran, the anger at Iranian terrorism and destabilization across the Middle East, this has brought the Arabs and Israel together. And so we're at a place right now where Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, the Donald Trump administration may be able to utilize the Arab states for the first time in trying to bring the Palestinians to the negotiating table. They may have a more positive role to play because of this shared antipathy toward the Iranians.
Well, they're being tight-lipped about this peace plan. I don't think it's all completely formulated yet. They're still adding to it, I'm sure. What do you think's in it?
You know, it's funny, I've had the opportunity to talk with some of the folks at the White House about this. It is an incredibly well-guarded secret. They don't share any of the specifics, not privately, not publicly. It's really remarkable. There are a lot of people who say that this is like a Seinfeld episode. It's a show about nothing. And then there are other people who say, well, you know, it's going to be terrific. We just need to wait for this thing to be trotted out. My understanding is that it is going to be probably more generous to the Israelis than previous peace plans that have offered the Palestinians 90 or 95% of the West Bank. It'll probably be much less than that this time around. I think there's going to be a lot of economic inducements for the Palestinians. They're going to try to bring the Palestinians along economically before giving them a lot of those political benefits that they've been looking for.
Little carrot and stick approach here.
I think that's right.
I think. Now, some people have said that the Saudis, part of this proposal is to allow the Saudis to have control over parts of the Temple Mount and the Al-Aqsa Mosque and so forth. And you know, as I do, I've been covering this for many years now. Jerusalem is a sticking point.
It absolutely will be. I think that it's probably a non-starter for the Saudis to have control. You have to remember the Jordanians have long laid claim to Jerusalem, that even after the Israelis reclaimed Jerusalem after the 1967 war, they still allowed the religious authorities in Jordan to continue to administer the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I expect that to continue, given the fact that there's already a peace agreement between the Jordanians and the Israelis. I think the Israelis would be loath to disrupt that in any way.
Now, Mahmoud Abbas is saying, look, we really need an international conference here. Forget what Trump is doing. Almost seems like he's trying to sabotage whatever Jared Kushner and Trump are trying to pull off here.
He absolutely is. This is a guy, you have to remember, he's now, I think it's 14 years into a 4-year term. He's getting up there in age. He won't name a vice president. He wants to control the entire process, and his people are very angry at the White House. Of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem last year. We've been defunding the Palestinians because of their support for terrorism. So there is antipathy between this Palestinian Authority and the White House. I don't expect these guys to cooperate, and I expect them to be the folks that say no, no matter what is trotted out by the White House, and I think the Israelis are probably banking on that.
Not to mention Hamas. What do you do about them in Gaza?
Well, that's actually an interesting thing. That's come up a number of times with my conversations with folks in the White House about this. They continue to be vexed by this problem. Of course, there are effectively 2 Palestinian entities right now, one in the Gaza Strip controlled by Hamas, the other one in the West Bank controlled by Mahmoud Abbas. These 2 sides are at war. They have been at war with one another since 2007. And so any deal that is going to be struck will only encompass the West Bank. It's not like Hamas is going to come to the table and end all of its claims. That's really not in the cards. So we're not going to have a final status negotiation no matter what happens.
Up next, Russia and Syria want the U.S. out of northeast Syria, but the people there are begging America to stay. Another major foreign policy challenge facing President Trump is what to do about northeast Syria. In December, he announced the pullout of all U.S. troops from the area. Since then, he's revised his decision to allow 400 U.S. peacekeepers in the region. But recently, Russia and Syria demanded the U.S. leave northeast Syria altogether. Here's a story we did from the region several weeks ago. We heard from many Christians who warned of a possible genocide if the U.S. pulls out. Just a few years ago, ISIS left a scar on the land in the form of an historic genocide. Now Christians fear another potential apocalypse with enemies all around them. Turkey is the main concern.
After the threats of Erdogan to this region that he wants to take the place of the great force of America, we felt danger because of this void. If it was filled by the countries of this region or another power, there will be danger in general for the people, and especially the Christian people.
The reason many people in northeast Syria are afraid of Turkey is because of what happened last year in northwest Syria, the Turkish invasion of Afrin. In January 2018, its army, along with Islamic militias called the Free Syrian Army, began a military campaign to capture the city of Afrin. Charmaine Heading of the Shai Fund lays out the Turks' goals.
We know from what the statements that they've made that they want to get rid of the people in this area and bring in other people from Syria. So it's a population displacement.
To find out more about the Afrin campaign, we traveled here to the city of Kobani and this evangelical church. Last year, Christians fled Afrin during the Turkish operation to take over the city. Some came here to Kobani to find refuge, security, and a place to worship. Zani pastors this church. He and his wife Shinar fled Afrin.
Everything in the church has been stolen. It's the terrorists' very natural behavior, and they burned the church.
Islamic soldiers allied with Turkey killed her cousin's child.
There were a group of people with weapons that entered our neighborhood and they were stealing. So my cousin went out and asked them, "What are you doing?" So the man with weapons attacked my cousin's house and shot and killed his son.
Turkish President Erdogan has threatened a similar campaign into northeast Syria. When Çınar heard about President Trump's decision, she prayed.
Every day we cried and prayed to the Lord that we would not end up like Afrin.
President Trump's decision surprised them.
We love the American president a lot. I have said that he is a believer and that he prays. And so I was surprised. Why did President Trump do this? That he immediately wants to withdraw the forces from here. Is it possible that he was not considering the church, or that he doesn't know that there are believers here?
In all, there's about 100,000 Christians in northeast Syria, most fearful of genocide. President Trump slowed down his timetable to pull out U.S. troops. But for Christians here, they're hoping and praying for much more than that. Because of the threat of a genocide against Christians and the people of northeast Syria, a number of prayer groups around the world are participating in a 3-day Esther fast to pray for the protection of the peoples of this region and for a godly resolution to this geopolitical dilemma. Coming up, CBN Scott Ross visits one of Judaism's holiest sites, the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron, a place at the center of a UN controversy. Hebron was one of the largest cities in biblical times and today is considered one of Israel's 4 holy cities. While it's a divided city under Israeli rule, you might be surprised to know Jews and Muslims peacefully share a holy site there. CBN Scott Ross has that story.
This is Hebron, the place Abraham buried his wife Sarah. Later, according to the Bible, he, his son Isaac, and grandson Jacob, and their wives were all buried here in the place now known as the Cave of the Patriarchs.
How old is this building? What is this building?
This building stands here 2,000 years. Abraham had purchased the whole field around and the cave some 4,000 years ago. Actually, we have discovered the cave. The cave is here.
Herod the Great, who constructed Jerusalem's second temple, also built a structure over the cave.
In the time of the Second Temple period, this structure was built here by the Jews to memorize and to build a place of coming and praying and being a part of this very, very long and special history.
1,200 years later, Muslim conquerors modified the structure by adding minarets. They now consider it the Al-Abrahami Mosque.
The shrine actually is 2 stories. The upper one is the place where people come and pray and enter under Muslim control. From the 13th century, Jews and Christians were not allowed in. They were denied access. They had to stand outside. Anyhow, today, thank God, it's open again.
Jews lived in the city until they were driven out in the 1929 riots. They returned after Israel regained control in 1967 during the Six-Day War. About 800 Jews now live in Hebron, surrounded by some 200,000 Arabs. Noam Arnon, a Jewish Israeli, has lived here more than 45 years.
The lower level contains the cave. Now this level is closed.
Why?
The Muslim Waqf, which controls the place, do not permit any archaeological research.
Revered by Jews, Christians, and Muslims as a holy city, Hebron was the first capital of King David. But recently, the United Nations deemed it a Muslim holy site in danger.
With the archaeological digs, would that prove the existence of Israel going back these thousands of years, if that was unearthed?
In Hebron, everything that you find fits all the biblical sources. When you read in Genesis 23 about Abraham, how he purchased the whole field around, and the trees, the cave is there, it's located right beneath the rocks there, which are the end of the field, and the cave itself was dated to the Middle Bronze Age, which is equal to the forefathers' era. In the cave we discovered vessels and pottery from the first temple period. You know, the name Hebron in Hebrew is connection.
Connection?
Yes, Hebron, lechaber is to connect. So in Hebron everything connects. The sources, the archaeology, the tradition, the holiness, everything connects together.
Arnon took me into the massive structure and showed me what they call the Gate of Heaven.
What is written here in Hebrew, Me'arat HaMachpelah Petach Gan Eden, the cave of Machpelah, according to ancient Jewish sources, is the gate of heaven. So now let's go. Let's go and see.
Let's go to heaven. Now we're into heaven.
Yes. Now actually part of the building today is closed for Jews. A part is open. We are in this part. Many people come to pray here from all the world, from all the religions. Today they speak about Abrahamic religions. Well, Abraham is right here. This is the memorial of Abraham. Actually, the cave is located right beneath this memorial. And we have here three couples, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebecca, Jacob and Leah.
So the actual bones are down underneath here?
Yes, underneath.
How did you discover it?
Well, it was in the middle of the night, one of the last nights of the Jewish calendar. And there are special prayers, and people come here and blow the shofar and sing many songs. So there was a lot of noise, and we, covered by that noise, we got the tools to open the gates of heaven, like hammers, like chisels.
That was decades ago, and no one is allowed in the cave anymore.
There were some stairs leading to a dark and long tunnel. We have crawled through this tunnel. We took some stones from the floor, and then we discovered the cave. Actually, it's two caves. I found myself crawling amongst human bones. So it's really to touch the history, to touch the Bible.
Nearby is the main synagogue where Jews can pray. Today, the building is divided between synagogue and mosque. The Muslim religious authorities control the religious aspects of the entire place, while Israel maintains the security. A unique arrangement helps keep the peace.
As you can see here, Muslims can visit to the big hall. Jews can visit the blue part, which is about 1/4 of the whole complex. Christians are allowed to both sides. This is the situation here, 344 days a year. 10 days a year, Jews are allowed to the big hall, and other 10 days a year, the Muslims are allowed to this side, and then the Jews stand outside.
Arnon says the arrangements aren't ideal. He'd rather everyone have complete access all the time.
We ask the government to open it. They say, it's standing, don't touch it. And it's working, don't touch it. So this is how it's working.
Scott Ross for CBN at the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron.
Up next, see how this Christian family faced severe hardship after fleeing ISIS, but then found a helping hand. Thousands of Christian families had to flee the Islamic State for their lives. Here's the story of one family that escaped, but then faced economic hardships, lack of food, and adequate shelter. But that's when Operation Blessing stepped in.
Miriam is a Christian refugee whose family had to flee their home in Mosul, Iraq to escape ISIS.
We heard over the loudspeakers of the mosque that ISIS was going to kill every Christian in the city. In the past, I worked with the US military as a driver. If ISIS found that out, my whole family will be slaughtered immediately.
The family had to walk through the desert for 2 days until someone offered them a ride. They eventually came to Amman, Jordan.
We are not allowed to have jobs, and it's very expensive paying for food and rent. I don't care about myself. I just want my wife and daughter to have food to eat.
We can't afford to register Miriam in school, and this is the time in her life when she needs an education. It makes me very sad, but through it all, we have kept our faith. Jesus will provide.
When Operation Blessing met Miriam's family, we took them shopping for food and hygiene products.
From our first days in Jordan until now, I have not met anyone as nice as you. You have brought us joy, and we are so grateful for your help.
Miriam is now enrolled in our Operation Blessing-funded Christian school. Each student is given a handmade uniform, books, snacks, and bus rides to and from school. We even have a staff nurse and a clinic we keep stocked with medicine that's available to all the refugees free of charge.
I really love this school, and all of the teachers there treat us really well. I get to eat, play, and study with all of my friends. It's the best.
It makes me very happy that this is a school that teaches Christian values focused on Jesus.
I'm very grateful to you for supporting us and the other Christian refugees from Iraq. You are helping us as Jesus would, and He will bless you abundantly.
Before we felt like we had been forgotten, but I'm so happy now because you thought of us.
Thank you so much for praying for us and taking care of us. I love you.
After meeting some of these Christian families who fled ISIS, it's heartwarming to see some of them get the help and the love they need. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.